This is Kardec Radio bringing you the book, Getting to the Light, Spiritist Therapy for Discarnate Spirits, written by Nilson de Souza Pereira. This partial audio recording will cover Part 2, pages 10 through 12. Spiritist Therapy for Discarnate Spirits. We should guide the conversation in such a way that slowly and safely the disturbed communicant realizes what has truly happened upon discarnation. At the same time, we should also provide orientation for the discarnate spirit to follow the instructions of his or her spirit guide, who will be close by, just waiting for him or her to calm down. Once that happens, the spirit instructors will become visible to the patient and will lead him or her to a place where they will be helped and become fully aware of all the implications of the new situation. It is imperative to avoid unproductive debates, particularly when attending to an intellectual spirit who in the physical body used to have a materialistic view of the world and still denies that there can be life after the death of the body. The best approach in such cases is to propose a spiritual self-assessment of the notable differences between the past and the present life to help the discarnate spirit realize his or her true condition, and that what happened was considerably more than a faint or temporary loss of consciousness. The discarnate spirit will then realize why others are not listening or responding to him or her, why he or she isn't being recognized or noticed when approaching us. In serious cases of homicides, suicides, wars, and other tragedies, we must comfort the troubled spirits with calming expressions that instill trust. This will prepare the communicating spirit to receive help, so that the superior spirits can apply the soothing treatments and guide them to specialized places in spiritual colonies. To get to know more about spiritual colonies in the afterlife, please read the books No Solar and Life Goes On by the spirit doctor André Louise. There they will awaken without the pains that were imprinted on the perispirit, which is a semi-material substance which constitutes the innermost envelope of the spirit, and it unites the soul with the body by the emotional and traumatic changes caused by the type of death they suffered. Those troubled spirits present themselves in such a tormented state that they inspire a great deal of compassion. They feel desperate because they have not had enough time or inner balance to understand the phenomenon of unexpected and tragic death. In these cases of traumatic death, the mediumistic communication also serves another important goal. Due to the suddenness of the death, the spirit might still be suffering from an excess of vital energy, which can cause harmful sensations. The medium serves as a powerful absorbent, able to pull out the excessive energy, decrease the density of animal fluids, and alleviate those harmful sensations. Frequently, communications involve another type of troubled spirits who call themselves obsessors. To learn more about obsession and obsessors, read Chapter 23 of the Medium's book by Allan Kardec. They enjoy exposing and chasing incarnates whom they regard as their enemies. Obsessors have not forgiven others their perceived offenses and are now wrapped up in the role of avengers, retaliating against past offenses, of which the person being persecuted may not even be aware, because they occurred in previous lives. Obsessors are driven by hallucinations and consumed by hatred. They make themselves deaf to any argument and remain immersed in mono-ideas or singular ideas of revenge and destruction. Thus, patience and compassion are necessary in order to break the dense vibrations that constitute barriers behind which they hide. Obsessors are often skilled in the art of discussion and capable of well-constructed sophisms. They can be problematic and rather aggressive, creating situations that must be managed with skill. The most efficient psychotherapy for such obsessors is a kind and honest approach. The main goal of the service is not to release the incarnate person who suffers from being held hostage to the persecution of an obsessor. Rather, the goal is to extend compassion to the torturer who is still suffering until now, since the time when today's victim injured the obsessor in a past life. The incarnate murderer of yesterday has forgotten the crime, but the discarnate victim, who is now the obsessor, remembers and suffers. The obsession is ultimately unfair to the obsessor. By staying in this tormenting and revengeful mode, the obsessor is actually acquiring new debts. The sovereign laws of life do not let anybody escape the consequences of his or her actions. A person who injures or causes damage to another human being may escape the justice of man, but can never run away from him or herself. The offender ends up always being caught by the mechanisms of justice, which can be expressed in a current or future life in the form of serious diseases, congenital or not, moral, financial, and social problems, or other bitter experiences during earthly existence. This justice is not punishment for the sake of punishment, but the law of cause and effect. We write our own destiny through the actions we practice. Moreover, between the suffering of the discarnate obsessor and the incarnate obsessed, the spiritual psychotherapist is committed to freeing up the one who suffers the most, which in this case is the discarnate. The psychotherapist will advise the discarnate obsessor that he or she must learn from the victim's situation in order to seek self-improvement and advance towards happiness. As long as the obsessor keeps seeking revenge against the person who hurt him or her in the past, the obsessor is still suffering from that previous hurt. It is only by letting go, by no longer worrying about the old offender, that the troubled soul can finally heal and move on. Otherwise, the obsessor will sign his or her own sentence, sowing sufferings that will inevitably be reaped later. If the unrepentant collector persists, the spiritual psychotherapist can, in some cases, try the application of hypnosis. This requires the therapist to lead the obsessor back in time and space so that the troubled spirit can realize that whatever hurt him or her in the past was not a purely isolated event. The cause is in fact inscribed within him or herself, when in past existences he or she became a debtor because of his or her own ignoble actions. It is never right for somebody to allow oneself the role of judge, jury, and executioner, since there are divine resources to repair the offense without our intervention. Nevertheless, when in serious trouble, an unhappy soul may have taken the tool of justice in his or her own hands, and caused us harm that at first glance was unjustified, but in so doing that person then became an outlaw too. The therapist can also help the obsessor return to the memories of his or her own past mistakes. By doing so, this troubled spirit will realize that continuing the insane persecution of the incarnate enemy would only worsen the situation. Continuing with the obsession would only transfer to another phase of life, something that could be solved through a moment of dialogue. Other situations of spiritual therapy involve entities who used to hold a prominent religious position in earthly life, who are still governed by intolerance and dogmatism, and who demand special attention and consideration when establishing communication. They call themselves messengers of truth, are firmly against Spiritism, and become cynical and well-versed tormentors.